So hello, I'm John Krasno. I am one of, I'm pleased to say, many vice presidents here at Temple Concord. And I want to welcome you to our candidates debate for the 52nd State Senate District. We hope that this will be the first of several such events this fall. And with that, I want to turn it over to our moderator, Channel 34's Jim Emke, a neighbor of Temple Concord.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, indeed. I walked here with my umbrella. Of course, it started raining the moment I stepped off my porch. So yes, again, I am Jim Emke, and it is an honor and a privilege to be here today with all of you, both present in the social hall here at Temple Concord on Riverside Drive in Binghamton, as well as the dozens of people I'm told are following along on Zoom. So thank you so much for joining us, and just wanted to let our Zoom audience know that if you enter something in chat, the Zoom host will be able to see it. But as of now, there will not be a way to interact with the debate over Zoom. I just wanted to also suggest that everyone who has one of these devices, please mute them, as I have done. Failed to do that during the newscast this evening. So if you're watching, the phone went off when my wife wanted to know where her jacket was. Also just wanted to briefly go over the rules that have been laid out and agreed upon. After my introduction, each of the candidates will have an opportunity for a 2-minute opening statement, starting with Leah Webb and followed by Leslie Danks Burke. Similarly, at the very end, there will be 2 minutes of closing statement, again, started by Leah Webb, and second will be Leslie Danks Burke. So time for our rather brief introduction, because I want to leave as much time for questions and answers. And by the way, during the question and answer phase, we're going to allot 2 minutes per answer. I would ask the candidates that if you're in the midst of a sentence and your time is running out, go ahead, complete your sentence, but please don't start a new sentence after your time has run out. But I'm definitely looking forward to a spirited and lively debate that is also respectful and civil. So we'll start with our introductions. To my right here is former city councilwoman representing Binghamton's downtown and north side, and an educator at Binghamton University, Leah Webb. And to my left is a lawyer and longtime regional public advocate who also teaches the First Amendment at Cornell University's Law School, Leslie Danks Burke. All right, so we're going to ease into things a bit here. We have a combination of questions that I've come up with and questions that have been submitted, and I will try to acknowledge whoever made the submission as I go along. But we're going to start with one of my questions, and I'll admit it's, pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, John. I did that once before, actually, one of these. You'd think I'd learned by now. Okay, so anyway, never mind my question. Let's start with Leah Webb's opening statement. Go ahead, Leah.
Well, thank you everyone for making time on such a lovely weather-filled evening to be here. And I also want to give a special thank you to Temple Concord for hosting this debate tonight, and of course to you, Jim, for moderating it. I am excited to be here, and one of the things I want to do is share some things that I've been hearing along the campaign trail. Uneducated, inexperienced, not ready. And so I want to take just a brief moment to allow everyone to get to know me a little better. I was born and raised right here in Broome County on the south side of Binghamton. I am the first person in my family to graduate from college, and I earned a degree in neuroscience. I am educated. I have more than 15 years of experience working right here in the Southern Tier and across the state on healthcare reform, education reform, environmental, racial, and social justice as a community organizer. I also had the honor and privilege of serving on Binghamton City Council for 2 consecutive terms here in Binghamton. And I worked on a variety of issues: job creation, affordable housing. I am experienced. I also work as an educator at Binghamton University, advancing issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion with the intent and mission of making not only our campus community more inclusive and welcoming, but our community at large. I grew up in a Judaic household, and I learned very early on that the value of being my brother and sister's keeper, and also of living my life through mitzvah, which is deeds of kindness and empowering and lifting up others. That is what I have lived my life as. Public service is not just a profession, it is who I am. And I look forward to serving you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. And now we will have opening statements from Ms. Danks-Burke.
I'll let the counter get. It's okay. I should go ahead and start? Okay. Good evening. I'm Leslie Danks-Burke. I am proud to be running for New York State Senate in the brand new 52nd State Senate District. Thank you very much to Temple Concord for hosting this tremendously important civic engagement forum. And thank you very much, Jim, for choosing to dedicate your evening to making sure that the voters have an opportunity to hear from us candidates. And I also want to thank my colleague, Leah Webb, for agreeing to participate in this forum, because this is how voter engagement happens. And I'm deeply grateful to be here with all of you. I am a lawyer, a public advocate, a mom, a daughter of farmers, and I have deep regional experience across the Southern Tier and Finger Lakes and Central New York regions, fighting for jobs, schools, farms, economic equality, internet access, healthcare, childcare, education, both at the pre-K and before pre-K level, all the way up to the college level. And I know that here in the Southern Tier and Finger Lakes and Central New York region, we have gotten left behind, but we deserve better. We are full of beautiful opportunity in this region. We have great resources. We have tremendously hardworking people. And I know that we can send a Democrat to the New York State Senate to be a great partner with our Assemblywoman, Donna Lupardo, and bring back the investment that the Southern Tier and Finger Lakes deserves. I ran before. I ran in a deeply gerrymandered district that was only 32% Democrats. I proudly stood up and fought because I believe you fight even if the odds are stacked against you. I was proud to earn 55,000 votes in that race. In that 32% Democratic district, I pulled 45% of the vote. That is because people across the Southern Tier and Finger Lakes are demanding change. And I'm excited to get in there and fight hard for it. Thank you.
All right. Well, I just want to point out we had a brief issue with our timer, but Leslie, you did very well. You were right there at 2 minutes, so thank you. I'm also
Even
going
without
to-
the clock.
Even without the clock. Very
Okay.
good. So maybe you could get into broadcasting. You have a good internal clock. Also just wondering if we're going to lose a lot of time with extended applause. So certainly if the moment moves you so and you cannot resist the urge, but really 15 seconds of applause after every answer is really going to eat into our 90 minutes. So I'll just point that out. All right, so we're going to start with one of my questions, which is certainly top of mind for many people right now across the country, and that's inflation. And certainly it's impacting people of lower income strata a lot more significantly than some others, especially when it comes to cost of food and gas and all of that. I'm going to pose this question first to Ms. Danks-Burke and then to Ms. Webb. Obviously, the state has suspended the gas tax, but what else could it be doing to try and address these rising prices?
Well, inflation is killing our families and our middle class and shoving people into poverty. And it is tremendously disruptive to families all across the Southern tier. That's why I called a few months ago for the price of gas at the pump to be tied to the price of crude oil. And I was one of the first Democrats to call for that. That is action that New York State could take that would seriously relieve all of the people who are struggling every single time we fill up our gas tanks. Right now, the gas companies are raking in billions while all of us are struggling to pay our bills. That's backwards. That's not how supply and demand is supposed to work. And it is our obligation to step in and make sure that the market forces are respecting supply and demand. New York State can, in addition to relieving the gas tax, which I am very glad Governor Kathy Hochul did, and Assemblywoman Donna Lupardo was a big part of relieving that as well, and I applaud her for that also. But in addition, we can take that next step and tie the price of gasoline at the pump to the price of crude oil so that those billionaires who are investing in gasoline companies are not exploiting all of the rest of us.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Webb?
Thank you, Jim. A big thing that I have been a proponent of and have fought for, not only as an organizer, but also as a city council member, is paying people a living wage. We have a lot of folks in our communities who are literally working 3 jobs and still just barely being above the federal poverty level. And I don't think that's fair, nor is it necessary. So I think it is important at the state level that we push for implementing a living wage across all sectors. I do appreciate what the governor has done with regards to in the legislature around suspending the gas tax, but we can also go a step further. In 2019, New York passed one of the most robust environmental bills in the country. And so looking at ways to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels is another great step that we can take. And so ironically, in the bill that was just passed in the Inflation Reduction Act, there is money set aside to help communities to do just that. And one of the ways that we can do that here in New York is by supporting the Electrifying Building Act. And there's money within the Inflation Reduction Act to provide funding for just that by helping with new construction, utilizing electric heat pumps. Also, when you think about other resources and challenges that this inflation has caused on many in our community, a big challenge that we are seeing is with the cost of food. And so one of the other ways in which we can most certainly begin to not only reduce the financial burden, but increase the economic investment is by creating much more support for our agricultural community. And that looks like not only helping our farmers with addressing high costs with insurance, and I'm not just talking about health insurance, I'm talking about liability insurance, making sure that with our farmers as they provide access to fresh produce through the SNAP programs and WIC, that can cover more things such as meat and dairy. Those are just a few thoughts that I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Webb. All right, another question from myself. We'll start with Ms. Webb this time. This is a topic I don't imagine there'll be much core disagreement on, but certainly major news in our country is the U.S. Supreme Court throwing out the Roe versus Wade decision and discontinuing a woman's federally constitutional right to an abortion. Clearly, abortion rights are not threatened in New York State, but just a few miles to our south in Pennsylvania, Republicans run the legislature there, and the Democratic governor is up for reelection. So it's not inconceivable that should Governor Wolf fail in his reelection attempt, that the Republicans might enact some abortion restrictions, possibly even look to ban the procedure. So what I'm curious about, given our proximity to Pennsylvania, what could and should, under a scenario like that, New York State do on behalf of women from other states?
So this is an excellent question. And one of the things I want to lift up is that although New York State, we are perceived to be okay, as anyone knows, and most certainly myself as a former legislator, when administrations change, so don't the priorities. And so although right now in New York, we have some protections and provisions, we can and we must go further. And so that's why I've been very active and advocating for the Equality Amendment, which will actually incorporate reproductive rights into our New York State Constitution. And I'm so proud of this act because it gives us much more protection, much more access. And this is something that I know Planned Parenthood is a big advocate of, and I'm so proud to have received their endorsement for this reason. We cannot become comfortable. We have to do more. In addition, New York can actually become a sanctuary state. We know that most certainly that although, as you mentioned, Pennsylvania is our neighbor, people are coming from all over because of this devastating legislation that is literally hampering and hindering people's lives right now as we speak. And so investing resources in things such as making sure that we are receiving proper and comprehensive sexual health and reproductive health education in our schools is another great way. In addition to this, I want to go back to the Equality Amendment and the constitutional component of that. We get to vote on it as voters. It is not subjected to the whims of the political football that unfortunately happens far too often when it comes to policies. And so in this, back in July, the New York State Legislature and the governor actually started the ball rolling on that by holding a special session. Now, when the session comes back again, and hopefully I'll be the senator, this will be one of the first things I will push for is a vote on the Equality Amendment. So by the fall of next year, we as voters will be able to vote on and give much more guarantees for reproductive health in our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Ms. Danksberg?
So the question is, what should and could New York State do in this scenario? And this has been a significant part of my life work over the last couple of decades. I was very proud to serve on Planned Parenthood boards from 2012 until 2018. And during the course of that board service, as well as in other advocacy capacities of my life, I was very proud to work on getting the Reproductive Health Act passed in New York State. That finally did get passed in 2019, which was just in the nick of time before Roe versus Wade was overturned by the United States Supreme Court just mere months ago. And that is exactly the sort of foresightful effort that we need to see in legislators, because it's very clear that it's not going to be just abortion rights, but human rights across the board that are under attack. When you read that Supreme Court opinion and the corollary opinions to it, it's very clear that they are taking aim at additional rights as well. And so we need state legislators and state legislatures that are willing to step up and take that sort of preventive, proactive action in advance of the action by a very radicalized activist Supreme Court. What the New York State should do at this point is go one step further beyond the Reproductive Health Act, which wrote Roe versus Wade into New York State law in 2019. And as Ms. Webb pointed out, put that into the New York State Constitution. That is a three-part process. It has to get passed by 2 consecutive legislatures with an election year in between, and then it goes to the voters. Unfortunately, we had a similar experience with voting rights just last fall, and those voting rights were passed by 2 consecutive legislatures, and then it went to the voters for a vote, and the voters did not approve that. We need to see legislators and political leaders who are going to stand up and make sure that the abortion rights protection in constitutional law goes through all three phases of that so that we have that right in our New York State Constitution.
All right, thank you. All right, next question will be the first that I'm taking from those that have been submitted. And we'll start with Ms. Danks-Burke. Martha Robertson submits a question. What can we do about the rising price of housing? What factors are important that state government can influence?
So the first thing that state government can do is rein in the corporate developers that are taxing and bankrupting families across the board. I want to see our tax structure rejiggered across the board so that corporate developers are not able to take care of those tax breaks. Second, we need to dramatically shift our property tax burden. We are paying higher property taxes in New York State than anywhere else in the country, and that money is not coming back to us here for our bridges and roads, our schools, our children's education, our social services. The reason is because we are using property taxes for regressive purposes that no other state uses them for. New York is the only state across 50 states that uses property taxes to pay for Medicaid. We need to change that. We need to remove that unfunded mandate, which will eliminate 50% across the board of the property tax burden. That will cut taxes for seniors who are on a fixed income, who aren't able to stay in the homes that they have already paid the mortgage off on because the taxes keep going up every year. That will cut rents for renters who are passed on the exorbitant cost by landlords who are forced to carry that property tax burden. It will cut the burden for families who are wanting to move into their first single family home, perhaps when they're having children for the first time. We need to make sure that we are eliminating the deeply regressive property taxes across the state that are killing our middle class and that are making it harder to start a family and age in place in New York than anywhere else in the country.
Thank you. Ms. Webb.
So I'd like to take a slightly different approach with this particular question because during this year's budget, Governor Hochul and the legislature actually allotted $5 billion to expand access to affordable housing. And one of the questions that I have, not only as a community advocate, but also as a former legislator who's worked on this issue, is where is that money going? How are we ensuring that this significant investment is reaching those that it needs to? And most certainly here in the Southern Tier, there are challenges as pertains to getting access to affordable housing. When you look at the housing stock, we have a significantly aged housing stock, not only in the Southern Tier, but across the state. And I was so happy during my time on City Council with programs such as Restore New York that really gave municipalities tools and resources to address aging infrastructure as pertains to homes. And we were able, just in my district alone, to either rehab or demolish, rebuild homes for affordability, and working with community housing development organizations, or as I say in the acronym soup, CHODOs, which are community housing development organizations here locally. And so I think it's important to bring not only those stakeholders, but also entities such as community land banks into the conversation around expanding access, creating more accountability. One of the things that we implemented while I was on council was establishing a vacant property registration where folks are buying up properties using ghost LLCs and then pushing people out, right? Where's the teeth? Where's the enforcement? And so as a state legislator, we have an opportunity and responsibility to partner with our local municipalities as it pertains to giving them much more ability so they're not hampered by things such as second-class cities law, which provides some prohibitions when municipalities want to create more accountability. And as a local leader, I understand that firsthand. And so it's important that the state works as a partner on that.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. All right, our next question, another submitted question. We'll start with Ms. Webb on this. It was submitted by Monica Silas. What do diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you, and how have you advanced DEI in your community?
This is a trick question. No, I'm just kidding. So, as I said at the beginning of our conversation this evening, I work as an educator around DEI at Binghamton University. And one of the things that is so important as we're seeing that with any terms that, you know, become culturally trendy, when you ask people, what does that mean? They're not always familiar. So I want to just share what that means in real simple terms. Diversity simply means we look at and see who's in the room. Do we have more of this population than we did before, right? So those things are important because it allows you to give an assessment as pertains to things like workforce development, education, opportunity, things of that nature. Inclusion, you allow yourself to ask these questions on, well, who's in the room and what experience are they having, right? And you can look at that through the lens of recruitment and retention at the workplace. We have a lot of resources that are spent across industries to recruit talent into our institutions, right? Which is important. But the retention piece is equally important because you need to talk about what's keeping people there or making them to leave. And that's where equity comes in. Equity allows you to ask deeper questions around why is it that folks are leaving? What are the conditions that are keeping folks in the majority as opposed to having a fair opportunity for things like promotion? And so not only as an educator at the university, but this is the same mantra that I have organized around right here in Broome County, but across the state, is that the way things are in our country and our community, it is so divisive. And so it is critically important for any leader, not just an elected official, for all of us as leaders in our respective institutions to operate from an equity and inclusion lens for this reason.
Thank you. Ms. Dangsberg.
Thank you very much. And I greatly appreciate the expertise that Ms. Webb brings as an educator in this field to this topic, and appreciate that education enormously. The way I have participated in diversity and equity and inclusion in my career is by making every single aspect of the work that I do, both paid work as a lawyer and also work that I do teaching law students and agriculture students at Cornell University, both in the agricultural school and in the law school, but also in my unpaid work, which includes a lot of board service and also advocacy work. I believe that it's incumbent upon me to make sure that I am carrying those principles forward with me in every aspect of my life. For example, in my legal practice, I made sure from the very beginning of my law practice to focus a substantial amount of time on work for folks who normally are not getting a fair day in court. I represented public housing residents. I participated in a police accountability clinic as far back as 2000, when there weren't very many people talking a lot about police accountability 22 years ago. I participated in legal work that went to the United States Supreme Court, representing incarcerated people who had traveled into United States from other countries south of the border and had been incarcerated in the United States without access to their consular rights in defiance of the US participation in the International Hague Convention. And I have been very proud also to represent incarcerated people across New York State who have suffered abuse at the hands of people charged with authority in our New York State correctional system. And in addition, in my non-professional work, I have spent a long time in board service for organizations like Planned Parenthood, like the libraries, like the community colleges, making sure that we are bringing those principles forward as often as possible.
right, thank you. All right, we'll turn now to one of my questions, and we'll start with Ms. Danks-Burke. This topic is agriculture, which quite frankly doesn't always get a whole lot of attention, but I think is a pretty significant economic driver in our region. What would you do on behalf of farmers, food processors, and the like if you were elected?
So agriculture may not get enough attention, and I absolutely believe it should get as much attention as it possibly can. I come from a background where my parents are farmers. They have been farming corn and wheat in Colorado for the last 30 years. I will say that I emphasize the wheat part with the T at the end because Colorado was one of the first states to legalize the growing of marijuana. And so I do want to emphasize that it is wheat that my parents grow. Given that my parents are farmers and have been farming for the last 30 years, I am intimately familiar with the trend in agriculture, which is very large corporate agricultural conglomerates moving in and demolishing the livelihood of family farms like those that we see here across upstate New York. I have made it my business over the last 20 years to do whatever I can to advocate for our upstate family farmers and to make sure that those very large corporate monopolies that are taking over agriculture all across the country do not move any further into New York State. We need an upstate-based food pipeline. We had a real opportunity to put that experiment into practice during COVID because we saw the challenge of produce and products rotting in farmers' fields and in their barns at the same time as children were going hungry in New York City because they were not able to get to their schools where their lunches and meals were provided. We need that upstate food pipeline to transfer those resources that we have upstate to the people who need them. We need banking support. We need investment support. We need legal support. We need tax relief. We need economic drivers for this massive economic engine that is our upstate agricultural sector. And I'm ready to get in there and fight hard for the farmers across upstate New York when I get to the Senate.
Thank you. Ms. Webb?
So this is a really important question. I had the opportunity to sit in on a public hearing that was led by our own Assemblywoman, Donna Lupardo, and the Commissioner of New York State Ag and Market. And I heard firsthand from farmers as they were sharing not only the challenges that they've been dealing with, but also ideas. And one of the big things that's important for me as someone who believes in building and establishing ongoing collaborations is who best to tell you what they need than the folks that are right there on the first line, right? And so some of the things that I mentioned earlier, I'll just bring back up. A big piece that stood out to me is the opportunity around workforce development. New York State, and a lot of folks don't realize this, has a lot of key crops that service not only New York, but across the country. And so I believe there are opportunities to partner with not only our educational institutions, but our farmers to really open up people's perspective on agriculture because it is an economic driver. It's not a question of if it is, it really is one. And so providing that opportunity for retention, workforce recruitment and retention into agriculture would be a huge boost. Also, we know, and looking at the Farm Bill and asking questions around what does this look like for us here in New York, the devastating impact of corporate farms receiving major subsidies at the expense of our small farms here in the region. And so I think it's important in looking at things such as, for instance, insurance, liability insurance. That's a major cost to farmers. Also, when I was on city council, I had the opportunity to work on addressing food desert issues right here in the region and supported initiatives like Farm to Table that brought both the rural and the urban community together because we're all human, right? Yes, and we need food. So it was an opportunity to bring together both rural and urban communities around our core essential human need for food. And farm to table is one of those examples. And so I would be looking to expand more out of the box ideas that really support our agricultural community in the region.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. All right, the next question comes from a former colleague of mine. I believe he's actually a member here. Jeff Platsky, formerly of the Press and Sun Bulletin. So his question reads like this, and we'll start with Ms. Webb. In Broome and Tioga counties, New York State and other municipal agencies have spent tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars in economic development aid and tax incentives to promote job creation over the past 30 years. Yet, our region has lost 20,000 private sector jobs since 1990 and more than 7,000 private sector jobs since the first day of the Cuomo administration, according to New York State Department of Labor statistics. What is New York State doing wrong?
So in thinking about the state of economic affairs in New York and this country, one of the things that I think is important to acknowledge in this equation is COVID. COVID most certainly, and I frame it this way intentionally, served as a massive mirror on issues and disparities that we already knew existed, and in our economy was no exception. And so in thinking about the impacts of COVID, but also in looking at wages, it's a really important question to think about how do we address wage inequality. We have folks who are leaving because, as I mentioned earlier, they're literally working 3 jobs and still barely being above the federal poverty level. One of the things that I was happy to work on during my time on council, but also currently through my work through the NAACP, is finding ways to not only get people prepared for these new industries. Right here in the Southern Tier, we have several colleges and universities that are developing incredible innovative opportunities. How are we getting people prepared for those jobs? We know that this region historically was a large manufacturing company, and unfortunately, those jobs were outsourced. So what are we doing now to prepare our workforce for these new opportunities? And so redefining what workforce development looks like, I think, is most certainly important. One of the things that I think is also an opportunity for us is to really look at ways in which we are expanding and supporting opportunities for small business development. We have resources in the region that help not only entrepreneurs, but even folks who haven't even considered it fully with opportunities to engage in small business development. And I was able to do some of this as a member of our Binghamton Local Development Corporation. And so those are a few ways that I think we can begin to address economic disparities. The last thing I'll say is that we have to really wrap our arms around the problem. And by that, I mean data through an equity lens, because oftentimes when you hear unemployment stats, we never get a deeper dive into, well, our unemployment is at 2%. 2% for who, right? So we have to do that deeper dive to figure out how is this issue impacting everyone so that we can develop much more strategic plans to really direct resources.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Ms. Danksberg.
So what I heard the question asked was, over the last several years, we have spent many millions of dollars on economic development that is designed to create jobs. And yet our region here in the Southern Tier has lost thousands upon thousands of jobs. So basically, Mr. Platsky is asking, what gives? And I have the same question. Government is not in the business of creating jobs. People create jobs. Government creates the circumstances in which people can create jobs. And when you see government spending millions and billions of dollars on supposedly job creation measures, and yet the jobs are evaporating, what gives? I'm very proud that I was among early Democrats to stand up and question deeply the economic development structure under the Governor Cuomo administration because it simply was not working for our Southern Tier region. We need to change that. We need to look at the lessons of the past and recognize that the deep investment that we have been putting into so-called job creation measures has not played out. Instead, what it has done is funnel enormous amounts of money into corporate coffers through corrupt means. We need to change that. We need a system in New York State that is actually working for the people who are paying the taxes, paying the bills, shouldering the tremendous costs of a government that is not creating jobs and instead allowing those jobs to evaporate from our region. We can do this. We have the tools at our disposal. What we need is for government to step in and create those circumstances for us. We need our infrastructure dollars that we're paying into the system and not getting here. We need our education investment that is going to train people from before pre-K all the way through college and beyond to make sure that we are keeping those educated people once we have invested those 20 years of education in them, to make sure that they are investing in our community by participating in job creation here. Once again, government does not create jobs, people create jobs, and it's government's business to make sure that it's happening efficiently.
Thank you. All right, our next question, we'll start with Ms. Danks-Burke on this one, was submitted by Irene Weiser. What is the most important climate legislation for the New York State Legislature to tackle in its next session, and why?
The most important legislation that the New York State Legislature needs to tackle is legislation that will move the tremendous burden of our climate action goals right now from off the shoulders of the lowest income people among us. And what do I mean by that? We have set as a state certain climate action goals. We have decided for ourselves that we are going to achieve certain renewable energy resources. We're going to achieve certain reductions in our fossil fuel usage. We have not laid out very clear metrics in which we're going to ensure that every single green electron that we preserve can come to benefit the people who are shouldering most of the burden. Right now, on Seneca Lake, for example, there is a Bitcoin mine that is churning through green electrons that profit billionaires, and those green electrons could be going to help low-income folks buy a more sustainable refrigerator, to help people with less buy electric vehicles that will allow them to participate in a renewable economy. Right now, with the system that we have, we are putting a thumb on the scale in favor of the billionaires and telling everyone else, you folks just figure it out. So the legislation that we need to pass immediately is legislation that tips that balance and makes sure that the people who want to transition to a more energy efficient refrigerator in their home are able to do that. The people who want to move to an electric vehicle so that they can reduce their fossil fuel footprint have that opportunity, and let the billionaires take care of themselves.
Thank you. Ms. Webb?
So environmental justice has been a long time interest of mine, most certainly here in the Southern Tier. In terms of addressing legislatively, climate action, a big piece that we can do right now, and I mentioned it earlier, focuses around, and there's money available right now for it, and that is the Electrify Buildings Act, right? This will allow folks to have their heat pumps transition to electric and not be gas dependent. I don't know about y'all, but when that NYSEG bill comes, I know a lot of folks, including myself, look all around the room and wonder, where'd this bill come from? So one of the opportunities with this, and again, this funding is a part of the Inflation Reduction Act that just got signed into law, I believe yesterday. We have an opportunity to utilize funding from that particular act along with key investments that we've been making here in New York State to reduce our carbon footprint. The reality is this. We know firsthand right here in the Southern Tier, the devastating impacts of climate change. I don't have to, bring up for folks, but I know people can recall the flood here in the Southern Tier in 2011. And I remember helping many seniors right up the street here clean out their homes, and they lost everything. And so this requires us to take immediate action. And unfortunately, there's an impression by some leaders that we have a lot of time. And the reality is we don't. And so there are opportunities and resources right now that we can engage through legislation here in New York. And as I mentioned before, we passed the Climate Protection Act back in 2019, which is the most robust legislation. And I think not only electrifying buildings, not only working with municipalities to help them to reduce their carbon footprint. And some of these things we started to work on right here in the Southern Tier in Binghamton when we established our climate action plan. So these are just a few things that we can do literally right now with respect to addressing that issue through legislation.
Thank you. I guess I have a bit of a follow-up question to that occurs to me, and perhaps I haven't read the Climate Action Council's scoping document closely enough, and perhaps there is detail about this, but from my vantage point, I hear a lot of what actually sound like fairly ambitious goals in terms of transitioning away from fossil fuels and electrifying homes and buildings. And I think of all the people I know, myself included, who rely, quite frankly, on gas to heat their homes, heat their water, cook their food, dry their clothes. Where does all that money come from? Do the residents and business owners have to shoulder the burden of this transition?
No,
as
not at
well?
all. So one of the things that in terms of resources we have right here in New York is an entity called NYSERDA. I don't know if folks are familiar with NYSERDA. NYSERDA provides funding for not only businesses, but also homeowners as it pertains to helping them to shift their appliances to those that are much more energy efficient. And so, as I mentioned earlier, with our gas bills all going through the roof, moving to a more electric model will save money in the long term. And there are resources to help homeowners, to help businesses in doing that right here in New York. Another thing that I think is important to think about around this issue is that, and we've seen this time and time again, that it's not until it hits us personally that we start to pay attention. And so having leadership at the state level that's being proactive on this is key. And so one of the things that I would be looking to do is looking at ways to create more accountability with the gas and oil industry in our state, because unfortunately, they are often controlling the narrative and directing the resources on these issues. And so I remember for me working on fracking here in Binghamton, actually leading a fight to ban fracking, these were some of the challenges that we came up against, was that trying to address these issues around the environment, but then having large dollar influencers also spending money influencing decision makers. And so that's another piece that I think is important to address when we talk about resources and education. I was ironically having a conversation with someone last night who was like, I really like my gas stove, right? And so the problem is, in the long term, it's actually costing you more money, but more importantly, there are and environmental challenges, but more importantly, there are resources that we have available right now in the state that can help residents and business owners.
Ms. Danks-Burke, how does the state help residents and business owners make this transition?
Well, it's an excellent question, Jim. And I think that it's very important to look at where that money is coming from. And Ms. Webb is right that there are programs like NYSERDA programs that provide those funds to residents who want to make that transition. But where does NYSERDA get its money from? right? It's not an unlimited pot. Well, NYSERDA gets its money from the tax dollars that taxpayers across the state pay. And we have to look very carefully at where those tax dollars are coming from and how much money we have available. Now, my concern is that if we are giving tax credits to large corporations that can very well afford to take the sort of hit that a low-income family of four cannot afford, then we are reducing the pool of money that organizations like NYSERDA have to then ultimately get that money back out into our communities. So I would go a step further than Ms. Webb is going. I would say the concern is not whether NYSERDA is funded enough, but where NYSERDA is getting its money and whether we're making sure that that funding stream is there. I believe very clearly that we have to be able to pay for any programs that we are advancing out there, because if we run out of money, the people who are going to get hit the hardest are the folks with the least. Absolutely. We know that's coming. And so what I will do as a legislator is ask those very tough questions. When NYSERDA runs out of money, who's going to pick up the bill? And my belief is that that bill has to get picked up out of those tax credits that right now are going to very large corporations who should not be getting them.
All right, thank you very much. Next question will go to you, Ms. Danks-Burke. And this is a pretty broad and open-ended question. And John, I'm actually going to suggest maybe 3 minutes on this one because it is so big. And I wish I had a more nuanced way of asking it, but it's basically about poverty, which is, let's face it, probably one could argue our biggest challenge. And I'd hate to think that it's just intractable and an unfortunate byproduct of capitalism, but sometimes it almost appears to be so. What possibly can be done to reduce the amount of poverty in our community?
It's a very important question. Right now, the largest growing demographic that we have are the working poor. And that's a new phenomenon, at least in the last several generations in America, and also a new phenomenon here in our Southern Tier region. Always before, the American capitalist democracy has pushed forward and expanded the middle class. And now we see a shrinking middle class. We see that people are getting shoved out of the middle class. We see the folks in poverty as a growing section of our population. And to me, that is wholly un-American. We've faced this problem in our American system before. We faced it around the turn of the 19th century when we saw that very large banks were monopolizing the system and were able to profiteer off of regular people. And what had to happen was the democratic system had to step in and right that wrong. The democratic system had to step in and make sure that capitalism was doing what it's supposed to do, which is advance a free marketplace and make sure that everyone has the opportunity to compete. And how do we do that? We do that through antitrust law. We do that by busting up those who are so big that they can monopolize the system. And we are dramatically overdue in our country for a shift in this. We need to bust up very large corporations that are profiteering off of regular Americans. I talked about my concern that gas companies are profiteering off Americans, New Yorkers at the gas pumps. Billionaire gas corporations have been raking it in during the pandemic. They are making millions and billions in profits, while regular families are having to scrimp and save in order to even fill up their car, to get to school, to get to the hospital, to get to work. That is outrageous. We see the same problem in large communications corporations that have now become international, but are United States based, such as Google or Facebook or other large communications corporations that, in my opinion, should be subjected to antitrust law. And I want to see the United States step up, take a lesson from history, do what Teddy Roosevelt did, and bust up the trusts.
Thank you, Ms. Webb.
So this is a very important question, not to say the other questions were not important. But I want to start off at a very baseline level. And what I mean by that is we need to define poverty. And what I mean by that is there's a stigma associated with being impoverished in this country, in this state. And so when you think about the idea of the working poor and images that come to people's minds, right? I remember working with community organizations like the Food Bank of the Southern Tier, because there is a significant number of families right here in the Southern Tier that are working and are still hungry. And if it wasn't for schools, a lot of our children wouldn't be fed. A quick, factoid, our child hunger poverty rate just in Broome County alone is double the state average. And so, as I mentioned earlier, how do you tackle this problem? You have to define it and unpack what it looks like in terms of experiences for our community members. And so a great place, in my opinion, to start is looking at issues around income inequality. We have people who are home care providers who are not only providing this essential service, but are also doubling and tripling in other jobs, simply because we don't have good paying jobs that allow our families to thrive. It only allows them to barely survive. And so one of the things that we can do here in the state, as I mentioned earlier, is to close those inequalities as pertains to income by supporting labor. Labor is one of our biggest assets because they work tirelessly to make sure that not only employees are working in safe environments, but they are being paid things like prevailing wage, living wage. Also, I mentioned food insecurity, but I want to talk about healthcare. As you think about poverty and the layers that are connected to it, healthcare is another key component. It is very expensive to be sick. Maybe it's just where I'm from, okay? And we're seeing firsthand families who had assets and resources literally go into medical bankruptcy because our healthcare system is failing them at every point in turn. Now, although we have the Affordable Care Act, and I advocated as a healthcare organizer for it, but we all knew that it was just intended to be a first step, right? We needed to build the rest of the house. And so that is why I support legislation like universal healthcare, specifically the New York Health Act, for that reason, is that our healthcare system is not only providing challenges around access to care, but the affordability component. The other piece I want to talk about is housing. And we mentioned this earlier. One of the things that is often talked about in community development circles is that one of the ways you can assess the health of a community, especially through a poverty lens, is what is happening with our youth and with our seniors. And if those two populations, for instance, are having access to quality, affordable housing, that is an indication also about the economic vibrancy of our communities. And so I say all this to say, when you think about poverty and what we can do from a legislative standpoint, it is important that we look at all the ways in which these issues I mentioned and others intersect and continue to perpetuate this vicious cycle.
Thank you. My next question will begin with Ms. Webb. Do you think that the state has done enough so far with criminal justice reform? And do you support reducing funding to law enforcement?
So criminal justice reform is something that is near and dear to me because, in my opinion, it requires a comprehensive approach. It's often talked about in a very linear fashion, and we never fully talk about what causes people to actually get in to the criminal justice system. And I'm talking about starting as early with the school to prison pipeline. And for folks that may or may not be familiar with this, this is the disproportionate suspension rates that are happening in our schools that have an impact, especially on students with special needs and students of color, as early as kindergarten, being suspended and kicked out of schools and putting them into the criminal justice system. At the same time, we also have issues, as we were just talking about, poverty, right? That is another component that feeds into our criminal justice system. And so that is why I support efforts that have been happening all over the country and most certainly in our state to reimagine what public safety looks like. And it requires a comprehensive approach, looking at things such as how is it that not only are people getting into our criminal justice system, but what's happening to them while they're there. It is a well-known fact that being poor, unfortunately, in our society are folks who are often criminalized the most. And so it's important that we address those issues around poverty as well. I also think that a number of recommendations that have come from municipalities, from a state standpoint, we need to support those recommendations that have come from municipalities all over as it pertains to reimagining public safety. I also do believe that we need to invest more in services such as mental health services. In addition, resources for folks who are struggling with addiction, dealing with domestic abuse. All of these issues require attention in our larger conversation about the criminal justice system.
Thank you. Ms. Danksberg?
Thank you. So the question was, has the state done enough around criminal justice reform? And the very simple answer is no. We simply cannot allow the Republicans to rewrite history. We know that the changes that the New York State Legislature has made over the last couple of years in the area of criminal justice reform have been one step on the path, but they aren't nearly enough. And the Republicans are now saying that simply because that one step on the path to criminal justice reform has not 100% solved the problem, we should go back to the world as it was before New York State began taking action. And we all know that we cannot go back to that world. We must keep moving forward. I am very appreciative of the solutions that Ms. Webb has outlined around education, around housing, around poverty, around affordability. Those are all tremendously important areas for us to be focusing on. And one of the things that I am very aware of is that whichever one of us goes on to face former Mayor Rich David in the general election here will be facing a man who is claiming that criminal justice is his top priority, and yet presided during his mayoral administration over the escalation of crime in Binghamton, such that Binghamton has now the 4th highest crime rate in the state. So, Mr. David, don't talk to me about criminal justice because you don't know what you're talking about. We need to stand up, fix the problems that we have behind us, and make sure that we're continuing to move forward on criminal justice reform, because we do continue to have a system that over incarcerates and over penalizes people from certain populations. And that is simply un-American.
Thank you. The next question is again for Ms. Danksberg, and it's another question from Martha Robertson. She writes, we have increasing numbers of people who are experiencing homelessness. And of course, we've already discussed both poverty and housing, but specifically in this instance, let's discuss homelessness. How can we address this particular part of the housing crisis?
Homelessness is very tied to all of the other areas that we have talked about as part of the poverty problem that America and the Southern Tier are facing. We have an education crisis here in New York State, in which schools in certain parts of our community are dramatically underfunded compared to schools in other parts of our communities. We have a social services and mental health crisis where mental health funding has been drastically cut across the state. We saw that happen right here in Binghamton when mental health beds were eliminated, and we saw dramatic rises in homelessness. I have a family member who has struggled with mental health challenges and homelessness himself. And so this is something that is very personal to me and that I take a very personal approach to. And I know that what our state needs to do is invest in those preventive measures like education, like social services, like mental health availability, like creating banking opportunities, low-income loans for first-time homeowners and first-time renters, making sure that we are creating every single opportunity that we can for people to move into their own homes and to continue to have an ability to pay the bills for that, and that we are not incurring the costs that come when we lose people out of the system. So it's an entire 360 problem. And we here in New York State have chipped away at one component after another of that 360 degrees. We have lost the mental health services. We have lost the education. We have lost the support through banks and other opportunities for first-time homebuyers and for renters who are just getting started. And we need to restore all of that so that we create this system that will allow people to be successful in homes.
Thank you. Ms. Webb?
One of the things that, in thinking about challenges facing folks in our community that are unhoused, one of the big challenges I feel is closing a lot of loopholes as it pertains to, or creating more of a safety net, rather, it's a better way to frame it, around resources. And I'll share a real quick personal story. I met someone recently, an older woman who is literally living in her car. And she has been trying to find housing easily for the last several months. And when she has gone to get services, the criteria that is used to determine what kind of resources she gets looks something like this. You're living in your car, you're not homeless. And so in my conversations with her, one of the loopholes, and again, safety net that needs to be created, is what resources are we providing to these agencies that are supposed to provide wraparound services? Another loophole is if you do have some type of money and you're going to even apply to get an apartment, you're having to pay an application fee. Well, if I only have $50 on me and 25 of it was just spent to complete an application, that there's no guarantee that I'm actually going to get housing, right? And I can't demonstrate that I have a place to live, that is a problem. And so some solutions that I think are important to consider and expand resources for are things like wraparound housing. And I don't know if people are familiar with this. One of the things with wraparound housing is that it not only provides shelter, which is a basic human need, but it also provides things such as mental health services. It's a complete wraparound service opportunity that we actually have been doing right here in Binghamton. And I think we need to expand and have more resources for it. Another key piece with regards to addressing the unhoused is looking at what affordable housing options we do have. And the challenge is that we don't have many. And so it's important that we have key investments in establishing more affordable housing so that we actually have places where people can live and not only just live for a few weeks, but have much more stability.
Thank you. All right, so we're down to about 20 minutes at this point, and I want to pivot from questions that are more topical in nature to ones more specific to each of you as an individual. And I would like to start with Ms. Webb. And then I'll ask the same question of each of you. How has your experience, your personal experience, prepared you for serving in the state Senate? And this question was submitted by Judith Rosenberg.
What experience do I have? I want to lift up some things that have prepared me for this role. I have worked as a community organizer for the last more than 15 years, not just simply in this region, across the state. And the reason why I feel that's important to share is because I understand from both the outside perspective as it pertains to being a legislator, but also having served as a legislator for 8 years, I understand the inside intricacies as it pertains to passing legislation. And so when you look at some of the issues we've been talking about this evening, wage inequality, the need to support our labor unions. I am a proud union member. Most certainly come from two parents that are also union members. And it's important that we have legislators that not only talk about supporting entities like labor, but actively support their mission. Also, in looking at some of the complex issues we've been talking about, I've been working on them not only as a legislator, but as a community organizer and as an educator. And we are witnessing right now, it seems like every week, intentional regressive policies that are stripping away our rights every day. Reproductive rights is a major one, right? The gutting of the EPA, putting our health in an unstable place. And so, having worked on these issues, I am not only ready, I am more than ready to hit the ground running, because I understand a lot of the loopholes that create these regressive policies, but more importantly, how do we build collaborations to create more equitable policies that will have a positive impact in our communities? And I'm not talking 20 years from now, I'm talking about in the immediate time. And so those are, I think, some of the areas that have prepared me for this role.
Ms. Dangsberg.
I'm a lawyer and I've practiced law for a long time, for almost 20 years. And I have deep experience walking into a room with differing views and coming out a winner. And that is what the Southern Tier and the Finger Lakes and Central New York region need in our next advocate. I understand tax policy. I understand how to fight these fights that unfortunately the Southern Tier has been on the losing side of for far too long. And that's a tremendous strength that I bring from my professional career, from my avocation of community advocacy and serving on boards. I understand how to work with people to get things done. I served on a Planned Parenthood board for 6 years from 2012 through until 2018. And I know that that healthcare board providing healthcare services for people all across a 10-county Southern Tier area was tremendously informative for me in understanding the access challenges and the healthcare challenges that so many families in our region are facing. But I will say also, I think that a tremendous strength that I bring is that I'm a mom. I've been a Girl Scout leader. And when I first ran for office, my daughter, who was then in kindergarten, asked me what that meant that I was going to be a legislator. And I explained that it meant, just like at circle time, when you sit down and decide what the rules of the classroom are going to be, I was going to be one of the people who was going to go forward and help decide what the rules of our community would be. And I think that that ability to lead children and to communicate with people effectively, regardless of their age or experience level, is something that we need in legislators. And so I really lift up my experience as a mom, because let me tell you, sometimes a room full of politicians is a lot like a room full of 2-year-olds.
Thank you. All right, next question from Ms. Dangsberg. Why is it that you've chosen to run for the state Senate rather than some other office? And what is it that you hope to accomplish in Albany?
So I get this question a lot. And it's the reason I'm running for New York State Senate is because I believe passionately in our region. And I spoke a little bit before about the Regional Economic Development Council and the job creation plans that those councils have made and have not necessarily lived up to. And I think that one of the challenges that we have seen in our region is that very often we get pitted against each other. You know, one community, one town, one municipality is forced to compete for funds with another community or another municipality. And I don't buy into that. I think that we have a tremendous region with tremendous opportunity, and we need to pull together to achieve the sort of opportunity that we know is very possible. Again, an analogy to a playground: whenever you see two little guys fighting with each other, you can usually bet that some big guy has just run away with the ball. And I want to get in there and make sure that we're standing up for all of the collection of communities that our region brings, and that we have this opportunity to face these challenges together. That is a strength that I have brought over my 15 years of advocacy for the Southern Tier and Finger Lakes and Central New York regions. And I'm very excited about taking that voice to the New York State Senate floor, because as I said before, Donna Lupardo needs a partner. She is doing a great job there advocating for our Binghamton and Broome County and Southern Tier region, but she does not have the partnership. She does not have a person in that Senate Democratic conference who is helping her to bring back the investment that this region needs. I am tremendously excited to get to Albany, stand side by side with leaders like Donna Lupardo, and make sure that we are getting the investment that our entire region needs, deserves, and is going to thrive on.
Thank you, Ms. Webb.
Same question.
Yep.
So the reason why I am running for state senate is very simple. People are tired. People are tired of having to beg and plead with our elected leadership and leaders to have them pass policies that aren't creating harm, policies that don't center their needs for respect and integrity as human beings. And as a lifelong public servant, it is for me important that we have leadership that not only understands these dynamics, but will actively fight for these key issues, such as the ones we've been talking about tonight: quality, affordable health care, access to affordable housing, jobs that allow us to thrive and not just simply survive, clean and safe water. These are core essential needs that we have, and there are real opportunities at the state level to really make that a reality for not just simply Senate District 52, but across the state. I think that the things that we're witnessing right now, as it pertains to, and I said this earlier, intentional actions to repeal and completely remove our rights, is going to continue to happen until we get leadership that's not just simply in office with this idea that it's about them. That is, leaders that are bringing people who are most affected by these issues in the decision-making room and not consulting them when the decision has already been made and passed. And as a former legislator, that is what I did all the time. I ensured that I brought people into City Hall, making sure that as we made decisions, that decisions were not being made absent of the voices of those who are most affected. I think that is so critical that we have leadership that is willing to listen, and more importantly, work and walk and lock in step with our community here in Senate District 52. And as a legislator, when you pass legislation, it doesn't just simply impact your district, it impacts the entire state. And I believe that we deserve more in our region, and we can have more in our region.
All right, thank you very much. At this point, we're about 10 minutes to 9, and I think we've had a very thoughtful conversation, and I thank you both very much. And with the consent of the candidates, and John, I think maybe 3 minutes for close, would that be acceptable? I know we laid down a ground rule of 2, but it's getting late, and I apologize to anyone who has submitted a question that I didn't get to. But at this point, I think I would like to move on to our close, and John, and with your consent, we'll go 3 minutes on the close. So we flipped a coin to begin, and Leah Webb opted to go first with her close. So go ahead, Leah.
So again, I would definitely like to thank Temple Concord and all of you for being here this evening. And of course, Jim, for your hard task of making sure that we stuck to the time limits as our moderator. One of the things that I often sit and think about is, what does our future look like? What condition do we want to leave our communities in for the next generation. And as I mentioned not too long ago, we are witnessing in real time an expedited path of our rights being repealed and pushed to being entirely removed. And what I think is so important when you think about all these issues that are important and essential that we need to address, as I said before, quality, affordable housing, healthcare. We have an environment that is volatile, right? And we need leadership that understands these issues. Also, at the same time, is willing to build bridges, not only with colleagues, but also with the community to make sure that the community is involved with these decisions. As someone who is also a proud labor member, pushing for economic justice is really important when you look at the issues we were talking about before around poverty. And so I am so excited to share that I was just endorsed by CSEA, one of New York's largest labor unions today. And the reason why I bring that up is simply this: we have to actively engage and push for policies that are equitable and inclusive, because we deserve it. And we deserve these resources, not just during an election cycle, not just during a political year, but from birth. And so for me, and it is my hope and desire that not only to take my experience and my commitment on all of these issues that we've talked about tonight, but going to Albany knowing that all of you will be there with me. And also with Assemblymember Donald Lupardo and all of the legislators pushing everyone to ensure that they are centering the needs of our communities, really creating a people-powered agenda for not just an election cycle, but moving forward. And so again, I want to thank everyone for your attention on these critical issues, because it is our right to have a democracy that works for all of us, not just in this moment, but as a movement. And so I humbly ask for the continued opportunity to serve as your state senator on August 23rd. Thank you.
I would say applause is very appropriate at this moment. So, okay, Ms. Dangsberg, your 3-minute closing statement.
Thank you. Like all of us who put ourselves out there into the public space, people often ask me why it is that I do this. Why, back in 2006, did I buckle my toddler into her car seat and begin driving all over upstate New York to get out the vote for Democrats? Why, in 2008, when I saw President Barack Obama during his first election campaign, I saw Confederate flags newly springing up all across rural New York. Why did I get involved to begin standing up against those new Confederate flags in upstate New York? Why did I stand up as the sole Democrat to run in 2016 and 2020 in districts that were deeply gerrymandered to ensure Republican victory, even though I pulled 55,000 votes in those races? Why would I stand up and run in districts that were designed for me to lose? I'll tell you, I do it for the same reason that I lead Girl Scout troops, the same reason that I bring my children with me to Planned Parenthood rallies, to labor union rallies, the same reason that I represent incarcerated people in my law practice, the same reason that I stood up for farmers across the Southern Tier and Finger Lakes area to make sure that we are doing everything we can to protect against agriculture monopolization. I do it because if those of us who have power choose not to, then we will be dragged into darkness. But even more than that, I do it because in that experience, there is light. There is tremendous hope. We are in a terrifically volatile time in politics. But I will tell you, there is hope because people like the folks in this room are coming together to stand up and say, we can do better. We know that this great democratic American experiment, this voyage that we have been on together for 250 years is not over yet. We know that it can be better, and we are standing together to give voice to that American dream that this will be a government of and by and for the people. And having participated in this for as long as I have, I know that we can do better and we will because we're doing it together. Thank you so very much. I will be honored to have your vote on August 23rd and then to go on and face the Republican in November because goodness knows we haven't had a Democrat in 100 years here elected to the state Senate, and we deserve one now. Thank you very much.
All right, well, a few more thank yous again. Thank you to Temple Concord for hosting us here and being so gracious. Thanks to John Krasno for all of his efforts in organizing this. Thank you to the audience for being so attentive. And of course, thank you to our candidates, Leah Webb and Leslie Danks Burke. I'm Jim Emke, and I'll see you at 11 o'clock tonight.